When talking about legendary martial arts manga, Fist of the North Star, also known as Hokuto no Ken, is always front and center, but its prequel, Fist of the Blue Sky or Soto no Ken, is rarely given as much recognition. Fist of the North Star is widely celebrated as a classic, while Blue Sky seems to regularly fly under the radar. This is especially apparent when looking at their various media: spin-offs, novels, movies, anime adaptations, collectibles, and games. North Star generally gets a lot more attention and recognition than Blue Sky. Despite its rich story, immaculate characters, and stylish setting, Blue Sky doesn't even have a single video game adaptation. Literally not one. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Before we get started, don't forget to that like button and subscribe for more content like this in the near future. A threatening and deadly, yet loving and honorable protagonist connected both directly and indirectly to crime organizations. A man who fights for his found family, his honor, and his beliefs, with an undying loyalty to those he cares about. A man with conviction as strong as his fist, with the power to turn those who were once enemies into allies, and some even friends. A story about gangs, violence, espionage, tragedy, but just as well redemption, loyalty, and family. A story that seamlessly blends a gritty crime drama with genuine hilarity. Now, if what I described to you sounded like the Yakuza series, then great, we're on the same track. That was just a few parallels that could be drawn between Fist of the Blue Sky and the Like a Dragon games by Gotoku Studio. But what's more fascinating is that they've made a Fist of the North Star game in the past. As a huge fan of both franchises, I've always felt like RGG chose the wrong series to adapt. Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise, otherwise known as Hokuto ga Gotoku, is RGG Studio's one and only game for the series. The game doesn't faithfully adapt the manga, but it does feature a lot of familiar elements and characters with mostly the same overall themes. In the manga, our protagonist Kenshiro and his companions are always on the move for one reason or another. It is a post-apocalyptic world after all, so not many places are left to really call home. However, in Lost Paradise, the game takes place mostly within a new location made originally for the game known as Eden, the City of Miracles. Eden essentially serves as this game's Kamurocho, which I found to be pretty unfitting for the setting. Now, there are decently inhabitable places within the manga as well, but not to the same degree that Eden presents itself. It's so lively and colorful at times that you kind of forget that this is a post-apocalyptic world, and as a result, I would argue this style is far more fitting for the prequel series. Fist of the Blue Sky, unlike North Star, is not a post-apocalyptic world. In fact, the series takes place primarily in 1930s Shanghai, a city filled with danger, opportunity, and political intrigue. Knowing RGG, they would have most likely made an original location for the hypothetical Blue Sky game as well and simply based it on Shanghai, or set it somewhere within, but the point remains that their expertise in crafting lifelike urban environments with gangs, fight clubs, gambling dens, and more would lead to a beautifully immersive setting that feels right at home with the source material in a way that Eden just doesn't for North Star. This next part may sound a bit pretentious, but keep in mind this is purely subjective and I am not saying any of this is fact. But I feel as though RGG's decision to make an original story for Lost Paradise with original characters held back the game's narrative. For someone like me, it was a lot of fun getting to see characters from the manga appear in games such as Sheen, Rei, and Rao. But after their brief appearance, I was left wondering what was even the point. These characters show up for the fan belief just as fast because RGG has no room for them in their story. My favorite example of this is Souther. In the manga, Souther is a merciless tyrant who kidnaps children and forces them to build a pyramid. He's one of the more evil and ruthless characters in the series, a guy you really can't wait to see get his comeuppance. In Lost Paradise, Souther is just kind of a dick. All that stuff that applies to his manga counterpart may still be true here, but it's not shown. It's not implied and it's not talked about. Souther just pops up because he's Souther and wants to take control of Eden. Kenshiro beats him on his first attempt and Souther leaves. That's it. None of the stuff with Shu, no child labor, no pyramid, Kenshiro doesn't suffer the grand defeat, and Souther is left to do whatever evil he so chooses outside of Eden. It's a moment that comes and goes seemingly out of obligation. This applies to basically every character in Lost Paradise that RGG didn't make themselves. I say all this because I feel RGG's way of writing would have lent itself much better to the pacing and atmosphere of Blue Sky instead. Presumably, they would still do an original story for Blue Sky and show popular manga characters just for fan service, but I wholeheartedly believe it will work a lot better here. It's hard for me to explain without giving a complete rundown of entire story arcs, but the dramatic storytelling and character journeys of RGG games is very similar to the structure of Blue Sky, a structure that, while similar, does not flow quite the same in North Star's context. It wouldn't be as jarring for characters like Mong, Geese, or Taiyan to make brief appearances. And not to mention, since the story takes place in Shanghai with loads of gang violence, there's plenty of room for RGG to fit in their original ideas without sacrificing the relevance of the characters from the source material. If you read both, you probably understand what I'm getting at. I wouldn't even go as far as to say Lost Paradise main and final villain Targa fits a bit more in the world of Blue Sky than he does in North Star, due to the fact that he's quite literally a cyborg, something that sounds incredibly implausible to achieve in a post-apocalyptic world with little to no resources. RGG Studio excels at crafting gripping narratives with strong character development, and the journey of 𝐁𝐞𝐜𝐸 Kenshiro is perfect for this style of storytelling. In a 1930s Shanghai or Shanghai-inspired setting, there's plenty of room for side content similar to what's found in Like a Dragon games, but also something uniquely designed for the time period. I have my grievances with the gameplay of Lost Paradise, but it's not relevant here, so I won't get too into it. Chances are a Blue Sky game would have played mostly the same, but I think the way 𝐁𝐸𝐸 engages with his opponents would warrant the style and flair similar to what we see in games like Lost Judgment or Pirate Yakuza. Of course, hindsight is 2020, so if they made a Blue Sky game initially instead, it more than likely would have played the exact same, which is fine in its own right. Still, there likely would have been gameplay changes to better reflect 𝐁𝐸𝐸's personality. While both he and Kenshiro are masters of hokuto Shinken, their use of it differs in tone, application, and context. 𝐁𝐸𝐸's combat style more so reflects classic Chinese martial arts, as evident by his posture and technique. His fights are more often than not precise, calculated, and more elegant in a way. He showcases more traditional martial arts movements, which have his combos blending fluidity and efficiency. It's less about the power of his strikes and more so the technique behind them. While this does mostly apply to Kenshiro as well, he's more so focused on raw power and aggression. His movements are straightforward and power-driven, more fitting for the time period he resides. A great way to understand the difference is by observing their outfits during their fights. The majority of 𝐁𝐸𝐸 Kenshiro's fights have him wearing a suit and tie or his iconic indigo yukata. Even in a life-or-death situation, he is well-dressed and presented rather stylishly, reflecting on the way he engages in combat. Kenshiro, on the other hand, is notorious for flexing so hard his shirt tears off. One is precise and showcases technique over power, while the other is all about how to apply techniques to his overwhelming power. It's a subtle difference, but one I'm sure RGG would have taken advantage of if given the opportunity. I believe 𝐁𝐸𝐸's way of fighting would have been handled better in RGG style and game engine at the time. What I described sounds more fitting when looking at the combat systems they've applied to prior titles like Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and even Yakuza 5, which ultimately would have led to a smoother and more fluid combat system than what was presented in Lost Paradise. The point of this video was to try and communicate why I feel RGG should not have made a Fist of the North Star game, but instead one for Fist of the Blue Sky. I'm sure there were many factors that went into the decision, but ultimately I blame brand recognition. Fist of the North Star is undoubtedly the more popular of the two. It's more widely known, has more of a cultural impact. As unfortunate as it is, that's just a reality. So I don't hold it against RGG, but I can't hope but long for what should have been. Even worse, it doesn't seem like RGG has any intentions on making a sequel to Lost Paradise, so the opportunity for something like this is seemingly gone. But now I want to hear what you guys think. Do you agree that Fist of the Blue Sky fits better with RGG's signature style? Or is Fist of the North Star the better fit in your eyes? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and here's hoping that RGG's run of Hokuto games isn't already dead.
お前はもう死んでいる。